Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to another weekly reading wrap-up. I'm going to try to do this pretty quickly because my brain is just not focusing very well today and I don't want to get held up trying to film this for hours. So I read 5 things this past week and here are my thoughts on them. First up is Foundry Site by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is one of the fantasy nominees for the BookTube SFF Awards this year, and I really enjoyed it, though it kind of bothers me that it took me so long to actually get through it. I started out reading about the first 200 pages in the physical book, and then I switched to listening to it on audiobook, and yet it still took me like a month to read, and I'm not really sure why. I liked the basic plot. I was really taken with the world building, especially how the magic works, probably because it's kind of based on writing in a certain script, like, you know, signs and such, and also language, and that's just really cool to me. I wasn't really into the main character Sanchia. I found her a little bit stereotypical, especially as a female protagonist in a fantasy novel. But yeah, I did like the overall story and what was going on. I found the last third or so to be more interesting, and maybe I'm alone in this, but I really enjoy the parts of the book where basically engineers are engineering things. That's my sort of thing. I enjoyed it. I think I rounded up my 3.5-star rating to 4 stars on Goodreads because I was kind of comparing it to City of Stairs. I liked that book. It's my only other experience with Bennett's writing, but I never continued with that series. But this one, I think I will definitely read the sequel. After that, I read another BookTube SFF Award nominee, and that was Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is nominated in the debut novel category, and I really enjoyed this. It is urban fantasy, but it also has kind of this almost post-apocalyptic feel to it. So it's set in the future after some major global climate change cataclysms, I believe. A lot of the world is now underwater, including like 2/3 of the North American continent. And the main character, Maggie, lives in the new nation of the Dene people, which is a Native American tribe. And so I think the name of the place is called Dinata. I have a hard time pronouncing some of the words and names from this book because I'm really unfamiliar with the language and the pronunciation. But that's actually one of the things I really enjoyed about this. It's urban fantasy based on Dene mythology and stories, and I adored that world building. It was so incredibly different from anything I'd read before. And while I was in the middle of it, I realized that I've read other books that incorporate Native American characters and mythology before, but I've never read one that used the names and words from the original languages rather than an English translation. So I have almost no exposure to any Native American languages, and I really appreciated that being dropped into this story. It was really interesting. So the story is about Maggie, who has 2 different sets of clan powers that make her a super warrior who kind of enjoys killing things. She was taken under the wing of a Dene warrior. I think he's either a god or a child of a god, and trained to be a monster slayer. Then Maggie is abandoned by her mentor for reasons she has no idea what happened, and she's kind of waiting to see if he will return or not. She takes a job to rescue a young girl who's been stolen by a monster, but Maggie realizes that this monster is something new. It's a little bit more akin to a zombie, and it's been made. So she sets out to find out who has the power to make these monsters and stop them, and she teams up with a young man who's training to be a medicine man named Kai. I really loved the main characters, Maggie and Kai. I really enjoyed their dynamic with each other and how they both kind of subvert gender role stereotypes in fantasy. That was really refreshing. I read this with some friends and I was the only one who didn't really pick up on some of the plot weaknesses. I was just so into the characters, I didn't really care. But I do think that the end of the book was a little bit rushed. Nevertheless, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I already have the second book on hold and I hope to get it in a couple of weeks. After that, I read The Duchess Steal by Tessa. This is a historical romance, and I picked this up purely because I just watched a wrap-up on Libby's channel where she talks about a ton of romance novels, and this was one of them, and I just felt in the mood to try something different, so I read this. It was okay. I'm not even really gonna go into the synopsis or anything. It was incredibly not true to the actual historical period, and that kept throwing me. I think it was set in the Regency era, but the way that people behave and talk, especially between genders and across different social statuses, was way, way off. So I thought it was alright, but I wasn't really impressed by the writing. I thought that I would continue on to read another book by Tessa, Romancing the Duke, which is like one of her really, really popular ones. I've seen a lot of people mention that one. I got a couple of chapters into it and then decided it wasn't my type of thing. So I think that this type of romance, like this genre of historical romance, is not my thing at all, but it was not an unpleasant way to spend a few hours. After that, I started what I hope is going to be my long Shakespeare binge by reading The Merry Wives of Windsor. This is the other Falstaff play, and I did not like him at all in the two Henry IV plays. Falstaff, not my jam. I don't think he's funny. I don't think he's amusing. But I probably enjoyed this play so much because he gets what he deserves, in my opinion. So in The Merry Wives of Windsor, Falstaff decides he's going to woo and seduce two women and get access to their husband's money. So he sends them these carbon copy letters declaring his love, but Mistress Page and Mistress Ford compare notes. They realize what he's trying to do, and they decide to basically play pranks on him. Their husbands do kind of get wind that somebody is after their wives. Mistress Page's husband is like, I'm not really that worried about it. But Mistress Ford's husband immediately flips his shiitake and is like, oh my god, somebody is trying to sleep with my wife and my honor. I'm going to catch the rogue in the act, etc. And yeah. So it's basically these two wives inviting Falstaff over and then doing things to him to get rid of him when their husbands are about to walk in. He gets thrown in the river with a bunch of dirty laundry. He gets beaten in black and blue when they disguise him as an old woman that Ford hates. And then he gets publicly shamed at the end during a sequence with fairies, which I didn't quite understand, but I thought it was really fun, actually. Not that I found it like funny or humorous, but I was into the storyline, and this is probably one of the few Shakespeare plays I've read so far where I felt like a woman was actually in charge and not about to be controlled or have things decided for her. There is a romantic subplot with Mistress Page's daughter, but I was really more focused on the two wives, and they're definitely in control in this, so I really enjoyed it. I probably enjoyed this, I think as a comedy more than like A Midsummer Night's Dream or Twelfth Night, so there is that. And the last thing that I read was a novel in verse called Finding Baba Yaga by Jane Yolen. I didn't really feel much about this. I am not really into Baba Yaga as a character from like folklore and fairy tales and stuff. I'm familiar with Baba Yaga, but she doesn't really necessarily push my buttons in the right way. So this was okay, and I think the poetry in it, the fact that it's in verse, while I read it because I was curious about that, it just did not particularly work for me and how I wanted to experience the story. So, you know, but I read it. It was a thing. So that is it. I am in the midst of a bunch of other things, and will hopefully be getting through a string of Shakespeare plays and getting them off of my physical TBR over the next week, but we will see, because now that I've just said I'm going to do it, my brain will just decide to do the complete opposite, because that is the way that TBRs work, right? Anyway, if you've read any of these books and you have anything to say about them, leave me a comment down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I will be back probably in a couple of days with my next video, if I can find time to edit them. I'm very busy right now. Anyway, I will talk to you again soon, whenever that is, and until then, bye.